Hi, this is Brittany Eldridge from Rise Above Radio Station. Is it okay if I call you Bill?
Yes.
Okay, because I know you go by WD Killpack, so I just wanted to be sure. So we do have some wonderful listeners on here today at Rise Above, and so just wanted to hear your story. And first, we'll start with, can you tell us where you're from?
I live in West Jordan, Utah.
Oh, wow. How's the weather there?
Really hot.
It's a little gloomy here in New Hampshire. I guess the hurricane's coming our way, I heard. I guess it's going on in Florida right now. So, all right. So, where can listeners find your books?
At killpack.net. It's KILPACK.net.
Awesome.
And there are links there to Amazon, to if you have the Barnes & Noble Nook, and also Kobo. There are links to all three on the site.
Awesome. That's awesome. So it seems like there's a variety of places where people can check your book out. As I was looking over your website, you have, is it correct, 2 books out now?
Yes.
Yes. And what is it called?
Book 1 is called Crown Prince, and book 2 is Order of Light.
Okay. I also saw on your website that you wrote your first book at 12.
Yeah. I had a teacher who really encouraged me, and she was my gifted and talented teacher and my language arts teacher. And she, regardless of what the assignment was, then she suggested to me that if I wanted, then I could do a chapter of a book for every assignment in those 2 classes. And by the end of the year, I had written my first fantasy novel. And, it was the work of a 12-year-old, but
Right.
up until that point, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to work for Marvel Comics or take them off their pedestal, either way. And when I did that, then it changed everything. I wanted to write books from then on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's pretty inspiring to have somebody in our life to inspire us, right? To kind of direct us in our calling, I call it. So the first book you said is called Crown Prince, excuse me. What is that particular? Can you give us a little background about what it...
Well, where the story started is that I had a recurring dream, and it just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And especially the first few times I had that dream, I woke up in tears. And when it just kept persisting, then I decided I needed to write something based on this. And that's pretty common from what I understand.
Yes.
And so when you have a dream, then you have all the backstory. It's just there, and it's instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing that was just so, I don't want to say crushing, but the thing that was so striking emotionally to build up that same kind of feeling that I had in that dream, that event actually doesn't take place until book 4.
Wow. So are your books is it like a series or?
Yeah. It's the Crown Prince and Order of Light are the first 2 of the New Blood saga, and it's 8 books.
Oh, wow.
And all 8 of them are written, and the first 2 are published. And right now I'm going through, and there's some things that during the first pass through, I knew that I was going to flesh out later.
Right.
And so it might have a quick reference in book 2, but the actual expanded portion is later. It might be book 6, who knows.
Right.
But that was the idea. And so I'm going through and weaving back in some of these things that I knew I'd develop later, or things that I developed later that I thought, there should at least be some reference to that sooner.
Right.
But all 8 of them are close to publishing level.
Right.
And I've got the cover design for book 3 done. I've got probably half the cover design of book 4 done.
Great.
But the plan is to have one come out every year for Christmas.
Yes.
That was the plan for Order of Light. I failed due to some issues with getting it published that I learned from.
Right. We all kind of go through some things, and you're like, oh, okay. And then, and then you're like, oh, you kind of learn as you go, in a sense, I feel. Things that you can improve, as you go on. That's what I'm finding anyways. But it's definitely a learning experience, I feel, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
So I see on your website as well, you've earned some awards as well.
Right.
So I wanted to see if you wanted to talk a little bit about those as well.
The most recent one was there's a podcast out of Washington State that is called Sinister Soup. Because of Crown Prince, they named me author of the month in just this past April.
Wow.
And so I got to be a guest on their podcast, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Getting some comments from them after they read Crown Prince, and one of the things that I love with my writing is getting an emotional response. I love that visceral something. And at one point, one of the hosts made a comment about how I had him just cringing, and it felt like I was just giggling uncontrollably. But listening to the recording, it wasn't as bad as I felt at the time. But I just couldn't help it, because that was, to me, was like mission accomplished.
Exactly.
But that was a lot of fun, and so that was the most recent one. Online Book Club has a Book of the Year contest.
Yes.
I don't know if they do it every year, because I'm still kind of learning the ropes here, but in 2020, in the sci-fi and fantasy category, Crown Prince was the runner-up for Book of the Year.
Wow.
And that is based on voting from their members.
Right.
And that was pretty cool. That I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And then previous to that, I received some special recognition from L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future, and then I've won awards in open competitions for journalism and poetry, the National Library of Poetry.
Wow.
I won some awards in some competitions that were open to all of North America. That was where I started with getting my work published, was with poetry.
Wow.
And this might sound strange, but I feel like my poetry isn't my strongest stuff, and so I wanted to have something to look forward to.
Right.
And that's why I started with publishing, which may or may not be the right way to go, but that's what I did. And
it helped you kind of come to who you are now, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing with poetry is that I think if you get to where you can look at things through sort of a poet's lens,
yes,
then it helps in terms of being able to recognize vibrancy or poignancy, where you can see something and get that poetic gleam out of it.
Yes.
Being able to see the beauty in a moment, that is really appealing to me. I'm a very visual writer.
Yes, I agree. It amazing that, particular people like yourself have that particular gift that can paint what it looks like for other people, so they can actually not only like see it, but actually can kind of feel it too, that's a great thing. Now, where can they find your poetry? Can they find it online, or?
There is some of it is still out there. I've been doing this for a while, and there is still some of it that's out there in some collections of poetry. But other than that, I haven't been able to find online. It's just either because they never did that, or because it's far enough back that that it's not out there.
Right.
But one of my unpublished works is a collection of my poetry that eventually I'll get to that. One of the things is that there's just not as big of a market for poetry as there is for other stuff.
Right. That makes sense. That does make sense. So I wanted to, before I ask the next question, was there anything regarding your books that you would like our listeners to know that maybe we haven't touched base on?
Well, one of the things that when I tell people that I've published fantasy novels, I get one of two responses that are about 50-50. One is they say, oh, like Harry Potter, and the other is like, oh, like Game of Thrones. And my stuff is more like Game of Thrones. My style is, I call it realistic fantasy.
Yes.
And so the people they have flaws, they make mistakes, they have needs that are more everyday life in addition to these grander things. So people die, people get hurt, people do dumb things, but also that leads to some stuff where, for example, having bad guys that you just love to hate.
Right.
And I read my stuff to my wife, and there are some characters that I can just say the name, and she has this really immediate emotional response. And again, I love that.
Right. To get that reaction.
So there is some, there is stuff that's violent. There is, it's not young adult fiction.
More mature adult. Yeah.
Yes. But one thing also is that the foundation of some of the characters is not necessarily what people might have considered. Back when I was in college, one of my degrees is in philosophy, and I was fascinated by Socrates.
Mm.
And one of the things that Socrates did was that he would go into sort of a trance-like state, and he would come out of it with some sort of epiphany. He called it being seized by the demon of philosophy. And so I always wanted to have that in one of my characters. And so Nathar is seized by the demon of sight. With that, then he sometimes goes into a trance-like state where he can't even move.
Wow.
And has visions of the future and the past. And so that's one of the things with him being the guardian of Merrick, is that he is saddled with the responsibility and the burden of knowing that there are some things that are coming, that are coming down the pike from the future. And so he and his father before him have been making plans for decades for the fall of a royal family. And so Crown Prince is all about some of that coming to be, the fall of the royal family, and escaping with the newborn Crown Prince. And
Wow.
despite all of Nathar's abilities, then he still has his doubts and still questions, and is also some of what I consider more realistic fantasy. It's not just a black and white character that knows his path and that's what I'm going to do, and
Right.
nothing's going to shake me or make me have second thoughts.
Right. Wow. Seems like it's a page turner. That's what it seems like.
The critics' responses have been awesome.
That's awesome, though. What I did want to leave listeners today is something. What would you encourage in your everyday life that has inspired you to keep moving forwards? Not only just with writing, but any dream or goal that somebody might have. What has been kind of like maybe something you've looked up to, or like something that's kind of kept you going in hard times, or stressful times? Just something like inspiring, something that might come to your mind that maybe could help others, because Rise Above is generally to bring all sorts of backgrounds onto Rise Above to be interviewed, but also I kind of called it Rise Above because I feel as though sometimes it can be hard to kind of pick yourself up and keep moving forwards. So I called it Rise Above because of that. And so I didn't know if you had something that you keep in your pocket to kind of help you move forwards when times get tough.
Sure. One of the things that was a huge part of my life was that I wrestled for 12 years. And at the peak of my career, I qualified for international competition in greco-roman wrestling. So with that, the influence, it's not just that there's something about the mentality in sports and in wrestling in particular, where every challenge that I face in life, whether it's in school or whether it's at work or whether it's personal, is I view it like an opponent. And whatever that challenge might be, I'm going to beat that opponent. I had opponents over the years that took me years to beat. And the thing with that is that, if it took me 3 years to beat them, and then every match, then what could I do that got me a little better? Well, this time the score was closer. This time I had the lead till the very end. This time I pulled it out, and next time I'm going to beat them worse than I did that time. And that sort of approach of constant improvement, and just, I'm not going to break down. Yeah, it can be discouraging to go out against an opponent and lose every time for 3 years, but I'm going to keep gaining ground on you, and eventually it's going to happen. Right. And that sort of philosophy on the wrestling mat, I wrestled 4 world champions and I beat 3 of them.
Wow.
One of them, after I only wrestled him once because he was always a weight below me, but one year at nationals he didn't make weight, and I always checked, and this guy was a 2-time world champ. So I checked, and not only did he not make weight, I had him first round.
Wow.
And I beat him, and then after they raised my hand, I gave him a hug, and I told him that, I've dreaded wrestling you for years. And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, me too." And that was a poignant moment in my life, because then that made me step back and said, "Whoa, that's where I am?
Right, right.
That you didn't want to wrestle me?" And that was, after that is when my biggest successes happened, because of that mental breakthrough. Even though I had been at a very high performing level for a number of years, I didn't realize that I was at that level until he said that.
Wow. It's like perspective, right? You just not realizing, kind of having all those self-doubt about yourself, right? And then realizing that your opponent, that's amazing though. And that's some good words to kind of keep in my pocket as well. So I thank you for sharing that. All right, Bill. So I did want to thank you for coming on to Rise Above Radio Station today. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story, your background, and your books. And I hope that there's more to come. And I hope only the best for you going forwards. And just want to thank you for coming again on to Rise Above Radio Station.
I appreciate the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you. And I hope you have a good day.